been working for you for a long time. In fact, through about 5 or 6 secretaries of agriculture. And from the very beginning, we've tried to get the Office of the Secretary of Agriculture to understand there's an organization out here that really does represent independent cattle farmers and ranchers. They didn't know that. And success has been unsuccessful until recently. So this next gentleman came on board, and you first heard him called the competition czar. And his job was to implement the Packers and Stockyards Act, something that we've been trying to do for 20 plus years. So this is the first individual, high-level individual out of the Secretaries of Agriculture's office who really wanted to know what independent cattle producers needed by way of rules that would give them protections against the abusive market power of the concentrated meatpacking industry. And we've had regular conversations for the past several years. I've read some of the proposed rules and now some of the final rules that they've done. They started with the poultry industry first, but there is a rule now that does affect the cattle industry. And by way of action, by way of reading in the final rule, some of the recommendations that we had actually made convinces me that this gentleman is real. He's committed. And his name is Andy Green. And if the lighting were better, I wouldn't need these, but the lighting's kind of bad up here. So today, Andy Green is the Senior Advisor for Fair and Competitive Markets, and he coordinates USDA's competition and marketing regulatory policies. He leads the department's execution of President Biden's executive order on promoting competition in the American economy, including spearheading the modernization of the Packers and Stockyards Act rules to promote fair and competitive markets in both livestock and poultry. Prior to USDA, he was a managing director of economic policy and then a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. And there, he wrote a paper on the problems with antitrust and anti-competitive practices in the hog and corn industry. So I actually knew of Andy before he was appointed his competition position. But there he managed an economic policy team, covered macroeconomic policy, budget, tax, trade, financial markets, labor, infrastructure, and more. He authored reports on financial regulation, trade policy, antitrust, and agricultural policy, and middle-class economics. He previously served as counsel to the Commissioner of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, and before that he was counsel to U.S. Senator Jeff Markley from Oregon, and staff director of the U.S. Senate Banking Committee Subcommittee on Economic Policy. He participated in the passage of the Dodd-Frank Act in 2010 and was lead staff member for the passage of the prohibition on high-risk trades by banks named after former federal chairman Paul Volcker. And he began his career as a corporate securities in corporate securities law. But today, he understands your industry. He understands because through you, we've communicated with him. And with that, Andy Green, I would welcome you to the stage and visit with the people who I come to see you about. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for that very kind introduction. It is great to be back here in Deadwood, South Dakota. This is my second time here at RCAF, and it is an honor, it's a privilege to be with you, as I was saying to Bill and a couple of other folks. You know, I like to come, this is my second time of being able to come here and offer a report of what we're up to. But for me, the opportunity to sit there in the audience and listen to the presentations, but even more, have the conversations in the hallway. It's a tremendous opportunity for me to learn and test ideas and to deepen my knowledge and make sure that I'm bringing back the challenges, the ideas, the opportunities that you see, identify here at RCAF. And so thank you so much for having me. It's been 2 years since I was here. By the way, congrats on this 25th anniversary convention. It's a real achievement for this organization and achievement to the leadership Bill, and really the entire team. So many congratulations. But I wanted to talk today a little bit about what we've been able to do in the 2 years since I was last here, representing Secretary Vilsack and President Biden here around the competition and fair competitive markets work that has been so central to this USDA. I'd also like to talk a little bit about where we're going and what we have coming over the next several months. And I'd also like to talk a little bit about why it matters. You know why it matters, but I would like to just articulate again from my perspective, maybe in a way that perhaps can be inspiring, but perhaps can also help us identify the next set of challenges that we can work on together. Because as I've been saying to anybody who asked me about this, we are just beginning to deliver on the commitment to fair competitive markets that this secretary and this president has made so central to this USDA's work and really to across the administration's entire set of agendas. So 2 years ago, 2022, if I can do my math right, we were a year out from the executive order on promoting competition in America's economy. That order had 72 actions across the federal government, directing everything from figuring out how to lower the price of hearing aids to figuring out how we make sure that seeds don't get, the balance between patents on seeds and competition isn't out of whack, and everything in between. So at USDA, we have been doing a lot. And let me just tick through a handful of things that we have gotten done in the last 2 years I'm very proud of. The first one that Bill alluded to is we proposed and we finalized a rule under the Packers and Stockyards Act that addresses the Inclusive Competition Market Integrity Rule. It addresses retaliation, discrimination, and deception across livestock and poultry markets. Now, that sounds very, very general, but let me tell you what it does and why it really matters for this industry. For many years, USDA has received complaints and concerns around retaliation for producers, reporting to the government unfair practices, anti-competitive practices, deceptive practices, for seeking to form an association to represent your interests, for seeking to form cooperatives, retaliation for trying to engage in price discovery, where a producer might want to seek a new business opportunity with a different processor, but was told if you want to do that, you're not going to get a contract. You're not going to see another bid. All of those types of activities were occurring, and we set out a rule along with discrimination on the basis of very basic characteristics of the producer and deceptive practices that were threatening to make it really hard for independent producers to engage in a fair trade in the sector. And so what this rule did, which we proposed and finalized this last year, was give clarity around how USDA viewed those activities as prohibited. The packers and integrators are not permitted to do that, and we stand ready to enforce those rules. So as you are out doing the business of cattle and whatever other businesses you're doing in livestock, poultry, meats, etc., this rule stands ready to protect you and ensure the Packers and Stockyards Act is on your side in favor of fair and competitive, non-discriminatory, non-retaliatory markets. What else have we done since 2022? We've finalized a transparency rule in poultry, and we've proposed a new rule on fairness in poultry tournaments. Now, not many of you are likely to be involved in poultry, but I'd argue that these steps are really important for your industry as well. Because when the government is on the side of fairness, of transparency, opposed to deception, opposed to practices that squeeze producers and growers, wherever they may be, where that is when those types of unfair practices are permitted, it echoes across the entire marketplace. And when the government stands to say the rule of law and fair practices are the standard, unfair practices are prohibited, that echoes again across the entire sector. And that's one of the reasons why we've done so much work to make sure that starting with poultry, where the challenges are some of the most on the surface and need to be addressed. Certainly welcome you to take a look at the proposed rule that we offered in poultry. I'll just sort of describe it a little bit and see if it has any echoes for you in cattle and some of the other sectors. It says you have to have a firm fixed base price. It says that when the integrator is providing the grower with different types of inputs, it's got to meet a duty of a fair comparison. And then it's got to set out and document and have a sort of regularized process about how it will meet that. And then it's got to stick to it. And it says when the company is asking poultry growers to invest their hard-earned dollars, that they provide transparency around what the purpose of those investments are, what the risks, what the opportunities for returns, so that a grower can understand, are they likely to recoup their investment? That type of transparency under this proposed rule, if it were finalized, would enable the grower to better identify their opportunities, but also to better help enforce the current existing laws against unfair practices in the sector. So certainly welcome everyone to comment on that rule, whether you're in poultry or not. You can do so by going to the Federal Register. If you just look for USDA's poultry grower rules, packers and stockers, you'll certainly find it. What else have we done in the last 2 years? We have proposed and finalized a rule that I think a few of you might like. It's a rule that says if you are using a label that says your product is product of USA, that label has to be honest and has to be clear to consumers. And what does that mean? It means that the animal has to be born, raised, slaughtered, and processed right here in the US of A. It seems pretty basic. It's amazing that it wasn't the case beforehand, but it was not. We did the rule, we finalized it, and I'm very proud of that. What else have we been up to? We've been investing, as many of you probably know, and certainly your local communities, I hope, are starting to see the benefits, at least in construction and investment and new marketing opportunities. We've been investing $1 billion in meat and poultry processing capacity expansion. Now, that's not $1 billion in one plant here. That is spread across the country, but that's spread that is targeted into a range of communities where we think it's gonna have the most difference to create new opportunities for local and regional food systems, new marketing opportunities, choice for producers where they have another option to sell their product, livestock or poultry, and so that you're not captured by only the very largest commoditized marketing chains, those bottlenecks that we saw during the pandemic that break down so easily. So this $1 billion of American Rescue Plan funds meant to restore resiliency to our supply chains. They've gone into, again, financing of these new expansions, workforce training. We've heard across the country that workforce in this sector is a challenge. We're investing in helping to train that next generation of workers. We're investing in management capacity as well as inspection support. We know that the food safety is a technical and complicated area, and so we're helping to make sure that smaller processors have the skills and tools they need to succeed and make sure that our food is safe. So we're also investing in tribal capacity and a number of other very targeted opportunities for local processing, and again, local choice and resiliency in the system. We're also working to lower costs. I mean, all of this will lower costs, but one of the major areas where we've been working to lower cost is in fertilizer. For those of you who are either also in row crops or know folks there, the price of fertilizer spiked following the war in Ukraine, and it's kind of amazing if you go back and look at some of the mergers that were approved beforehand. There were economic studies that said, oh, the concentration is so high, but there'll be no problem. Well, unsurprisingly, there was a problem, and what we've been doing is investing in domestic, American, sustainable, new fertilizer capacity, and it's already been starting to, you can see the turn, the price in fertilizer has begun to come down. What else have we been doing? We have been bringing enforcement cases. This is really important. The USDA and the Department of Justice, and you're going to be hearing from my Department of Justice colleague tomorrow, who's been absolutely integral in building this partnership, we can't just do rules. We also have to bring cases, and those are very difficult. They require a lot of investigation, and you can't just willy-nilly throw the book at somebody. But we have been able to bring several important new landmark cases through our partnership with the Department of Justice. You'll hear probably tomorrow a good bit about the Wayne Sanderson case, very important, again, around firm fixed base prices in poultry. I'd also like to highlight a case we brought in November of this last year against Cook Foods, which prohibited termination fees that were seeking to punish growers for switching integrators. It's almost the most egregious, one of the most egregious types of anti-competitive behavior you could think about, to say, hey, you can't go and try to take advantage of choice competition in the market because we're going to penalize you based on the contract we've had. It doesn't just echo in poultry, it also matters a lot here in cattle, where if you have a relationship with a packer and the packer says, well, if you ever want another bid for me, you better not try to talk to any other packer. The case we brought stands for the point that that's not permissible. So I really encourage folks to think about the opportunities that we are case by case, rule by rule, opening up in price discovery, competition, and fair markets. Another thing that I want to highlight we've done over the last 2 years, we have partnered with state attorneys general. We have made $15 million, nearly $15 million, 12-something million, available to the state attorneys general to stand up cases, research, and experimentation for food and agriculture, competition, consumer protection, unfair practices across the board. So, Washington, D.C. is far away. You can call me anytime you like. I'll give you my card. I'll give you my email. Just come find me. But if I'm far away and I don't answer the phone, call me again. But you also can go to your state attorney general and you can say, there's a problem. Why don't you go to USDA and seek some money to try to stand up a case to investigate something that's affecting us right here and locally? And if they're not ready to do investigations, say, can we work with one of our land-grant universities and do a research project around this issue? Can we do an experimentation program? Can we experiment with exchange trading or new stockyards or new auction markets or whatever it is that we might want to try to experiment with? Can we try that? And the state attorneys general are going to talk to each other and figure out whether they want to give it a go. And we welcome that partnership because it's really important for our local law enforcement officials to be able to have the resources to bring these cases. And so for those of you who've ever talked to our state attorneys general, they have a lot on their plate. They commonly only have one person who does all of consumer protection and competition, from big tech to whatever it may be. And so providing this additional capacity for food and agriculture, we think, is a powerful tool to help amplify the capacity to bring cases that we at USDA and our Department of Justice colleagues have to get things done on the ground. Last thing I'd like to talk about in terms of what we've gotten done over the last 2 years is our work around seeds. So I already mentioned that patents and intellectual property in seeds is really important for competition. You know, patent is an intellectual property. They're the kind of fancy words for government-granted monopolies. That's all it is. You have monopoly to use this technology for 20 years or whatever time you have under the patent. And while you have that monopoly, nobody else can use that technology. Now, the reason is kind of obvious. If you've innovated, you've invested, you've figured this thing out, you're an inventor, of course you should be able to get that return. But if the patent is fuzzy, if it is overbroad, if it is based on seeds and traits and germplasm that's out in the field today, but just it's not somehow reflected in the scientific literature that the patent examiners look at, you're not going to have very good patents. You're not even going to have very good innovation. And so you're also going to have very concentrated markets because those who have the power to go seek those patents will do that and create broader and broader and broader monopolies around moats against competition around their core business practices. And so we have been tackling that through very hard, no pun intended, very weedy work, often in the details of seeds and traits and germplasm, very much focused on taking the publicly available filings that are at the patent office, working closely with our friends at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, making that information available to farmers, ranchers, plant breeders through a seed liaison at the Agricultural Marketing Service at USDA, and making sure that the voices of the farmer, the voices of the rancher, the voices of tribal seed stewards, the voices of plant breeders are brought back into that expertise, that scientific knowledge, that reality is brought back into the patent process so that what patents are granted are really robust, really high quality, really reward genuine innovation, yet also permit the new competitive choices to emerge over time. So I'm very proud of that work of the Seed Liaison. We've got more that we want to do there around promoting researcher access to germplasm so that researchers can build that next competitive opportunity. And that's all the things that we've been doing in the last 2 years. But we've got a lot more coming. I'm looking at my time, and I don't have a lot more time left. But let me cover a handful of things and then kind of wrap it up. And if we have time, I'd like to take a few questions. We still have coming this summer an additional rule under the Packers and Stockyards Act to address unfair practices and provide some clarity around when harm to competition is appropriately used in that. Certainly very much encourage you to read it, to review it, to offer your comments. It's going to be a very important rule. We're also working on, with our partners at Food Safety Inspection, there's an ongoing animal raising claims review going on. Again, things like what's grass-fed, what's pasture-raised, what's no antibiotics ever. How do we make sure that those labels that consumers spend money on are honest and that they flow, the consumer dollar then flows back to the ranchers, the farmers that are doing those practices that the consumer is paying their money for. We're working on delivering on that front. We're also working on a retail report so that the challenges in the concentration and competitive challenges at the retail level don't become something that the packer and the retailer have an excuse to say, well, you know, I can't do anything more for you, producer, because I've got this retail competition problem. No, we want to open up the food supply chain all the way from on the ground, here on the farm, all the way through to the shelf at the retailer level. And so we're working on a report around that. Thank you. So let me just wrap up with a last couple of thoughts about, why do we care? Why we have a lot more to do, by the way. This is just the beginning, as I've said. We care because this is competition and fair markets. It's about freedom. I don't use that lightly. It's genuinely about making economic freedom work. If you want markets to work, you better make sure they're competitive. Otherwise, those with power will abuse that power. It's about the rule of law and fairness. If we don't stand for the proposition that honesty in our markets is something that needs to be enforced, we're going to have dishonest markets pretty darn quickly, and that'll flow through a lot of other parts of our society as well. It's about making sure that we're working together as one country. We cannot have a situation where we're pitting consumers against producers. We need we saw what happens when that fails. It happened during the 2020, during the pandemic, where the price of beef went through the roof. There was nothing on the shelves, and the price of cattle went through the floor. No, that's all because of the bottlenecks in the middle of the system and the lack of rules for 30 years. And so we are building, thank you. We are tackling those bottlenecks. We are breaking those bottlenecks. We are putting in new rules. It is hard. It is a slog. I wish it could go faster. The bag's under my eyes because I've been working hard to try to deliver this as fast as we can. But we have to do this because we need to be one country where the working families that need the beef on their plates and the farmers or ranchers that raise cattle, livestock, we all benefit from more competition and fair markets. So there's a lot more to do. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to work as hard as I can on this. Every single day I have this opportunity, and I really appreciate the engagement that you all have offered over the past several years, and I look forward to staying close touch with you going forward. I'm happy to take questions if we have them, so let me know. If not, I'll be here all day and really appreciate this chance to have a conversation with you. Thank you.
Is it on now? Yes, no, maybe? Yes. Anyone got any questions for her? Now is your chance. Oh, here's one. Here's one.
What are y'all doing to help to ease regulations so small packers can get back into business?
Great question. One of the most important things we have been doing is, there's a number of places where you need to balance the regulations. So for packers and stockers perspective, we need to make sure that we're enforcing rules so that the big guys can't take advantage of their market power and ice the little guys out. So that's one important area. In terms of addressing the regulatory challenges, I mentioned that food safety is really complicated, and everybody knows that that's from a kind of a scale perspective, the big guys can afford to spend a lot, whereas as a percentage-wise, to meet that same floor is a lot more expensive for the small folks. I don't think the industry would benefit at all if folks are out getting sick. But what we can do is we can provide the support, and we have been providing the support of USDA for the smaller producer to be able to meet those minimum standards and to not be at a disadvantage. So that's one important tool we've been able to offer. Workforce training and workforce opportunity is another one. But certainly would welcome the chance to visit with you more after this conversation. If there are others that you can identify, and I'm happy to work with my colleagues in Washington to see what we can do about it.
Andy, I want to thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure working with you over several years. I just want to remind you a couple things. One, on the Product USA label, we would like to see a little faster timeline on that. And the other thing, as we visited in Kansas City, is in seed patenting rules. You might remember my quote to you that you shouldn't be allowed to patent a living organism. I want you to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Mike. We are pushing aggressively on the timeline for implementation, and I think that the fact that the rule was finalized now sends an important signal, and I think as consumers as well begin to identify and demand, I think that that process will shake loose. And so the regulatory deadline, this is not the kind of regulation where I think folks can wait till like the day before it's timed. They've got to be doing it throughout the process. And so I'm cautiously, not overly, cautiously optimistic that it's going to be moving faster than it might seem. In terms of seeds, I think you raise a very important point. The Supreme Court has stated it views things slightly differently. I'm not going to today argue that point yes or no, but I do want to point out that I'm certainly sympathetic to it. I want to point out that when we think about these types of things, we have to be really careful. And you've hit on something really, really important. When you get into traits and living organisms and whatnot, that the ownership, that the idea that you can own this type of thing, this innovation, very, very, you have to be very, very careful, because right now it's in seeds. There are folks talking about it in other types of parts of living organism structures. So I certainly appreciate that caution. And we stand by the work we're doing, where to the extent that it exists, we want to make sure that it is not locked up in the hands of just a small number of concentrated powers, that it is accurate, it's honest, and it is broadly distributed, and it has not become a monopoly where only a few are able to control it at the expense of everyone else.
Hey, Andy. Freddie Keaton here from Missouri. You talked about investing in small processors, and like the state of Missouri invested in small packing plants here a couple years ago, and now we have DNR coming in behind them and imposing wastewater management systems. And these rules are so big, they're making them basically be like a commercial kill plant. They're not cost effective. So we've wasted tax dollars to start these small packers, and now DNR and other government agencies coming in and shutting them down. Aren't we like cutting our nose off to spite our face there?
So let's visit after this, and let's see what we can do, because there are a range of USDA resources meant to support wastewater and things, and I absolutely hear you. One of the things that we have learned, or I think certainly have learned more broadly, is that the efficiencies of the large plant, to the extent there are efficiencies, they are not always in the kill floor. They're often in things like, how do you get rid of what do you do with the hides? How do you get rid of the offal? How do you do these other things that people never talk about or think about? And I think this is also one of those areas where you've got, a regulatory requirement. Nobody wants to see, water that's, making it so the kids can't swim in the river. But if you're a big plant, your ability to meet those minimum requirements, the percentage cost is lower overall, higher for you. So we need to think about the ways to make it so that those types of things are not the obstacles to competition, and that you have that opportunity to be in the market. So I hope we can visit.
Thank you. We have time for one more question.
Andy Geraldschreiber from Colorado. We appreciate your initiative and your inertia, but the political reality, if we have a change this year, how does that affect you and all of the work you've done? What's the political reality that you'll still be doing this a year from now? I mean, that we have an advocate in USDA working for changes in the packers and stockyards. Can you speak to that?
I very much appreciate that question. I'm honored. I can't say a lot. I am a political appointee, and so I serve at the pleasure of the secretary and the president. I'd like to think that what we've been doing has been about building momentum on a bipartisan basis. I'm not going to delude myself into thinking that the big powers that be all agree. They've certainly thrown up some opposition. They tried to cut off our funding. They failed. We got a modest budget increase. That's just so important. Packers and Stockyards division, just this little tiny division now within the Agricultural Marketing Service, saw its personnel cut by 40% between 2010 and 2020. Unsurprising that it was really hard to get a lot of this stuff going. We've now finally been able to start to refill those ranks. So if your kids, your cousins, your friends want to come work on this, come let me know. But so it's not that I'm not deluded into thinking that everybody agrees or that the big powers will lay down and roll over easily. But I'd like to think, I'm hopeful, and the strategy is if we build momentum and we do it in a sensible, straightforward, open way, it'll last. I can't promise that. I'm committed to do everything I can, regardless of what political party I work with. I work with everybody. And I hope that this is the kind of effort that can, again, last and build momentum and to show that we can have markets where there's open, competitive choice, and that those folks who are working hard and playing by the rules in those markets are treated fair. That's something that everybody should be able to get behind, and I'm committed to be there and work with anybody who stands for that proposition as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Andy.